The weight of a standard-issue point-blank ballistic vest is 29 pounds. I know the exact distribution of that weight against my shoulders, the way it compresses my chest, the way it dictates my breathing. For 12 years, as an operator with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department SWAT team, that weight has been my second skin. It is predictable. It obeys the laws of physics. If a round hits it, the ceramic plates do what they were engineered to do. They hold. People think the hardest part of tactical operations is the breach, the explosive dynamic entry, the flashbangs, the absolute chaos of clearing a room in 3 seconds. They are wrong. The hardest part is the silence right before the whistle blows, when you are stacked outside a reinforced door on a humid North Carolina night, listening to the heartbeat of the city and wondering who is on the other side. I always thought I left the danger on the pavement of uptown Charlotte. I thought my home in the quiet, tree-lined neighborhood of Plaza Midwood was my sanctuary, and Jason was the anchor that kept me tethered to it. Dear viewers, please let us know where you are watching from and which region or country you are in. Please like this video, watch it until the end, and subscribe to our channel. Your support is very important to us. Thank you so much. 5 years ago, when I married Jason Carter, I thought I had found a man who understood the fragility of life. He was a successful logistics consultant, smooth-spoken, handsome, and fiercely protective of me. While I dealt with the wreckage of humanity, he built a life of comfort and order for us, or so I believed. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the illusion shattered. I was off duty, folding laundry in our master bedroom, while the summer rain drummed against the window pane. Jason was in Atlanta on a 4-day business trip, or what he told me was a business trip. I needed to find the deed to our house for a refinancing meeting, a document he kept in the heavy oak desk in his home office. The drawer was locked. It shouldn't have been. We didn't keep secrets, or at least I had never given him a reason to lock me out. Using the tension wrench and lockpick I kept in my off-duty kit, a habit of the trade, it took me less than 30 seconds to open it. I expected to find tax returns and bank statements. Instead, I found a heavy, black, waterproof case hidden beneath a false bottom. Inside were 4 different American passports, all bearing Jason's face but with entirely different names. Along with them were stacks of banded $100 bills, dynamic ledger books detailing millions of dollars in offshore transfers, and an encrypted burner phone that suddenly buzzed in my hand, lighting up the dark room. A text message flashed across the screen from an unsaved number. The feds are sniffing around the Vegas accounts. We need to liquidate the Charlotte shell companies tonight. My breath hitched. The room tilted. My mind, trained to process high-stress data points in milliseconds, violently rejected what my eyes were seeing. The ledger didn't just contain numbers. It contained names of corporate entities that I recognized from a federal briefing my SWAT unit had attended just 3 days prior. We were being prepared to assist a multi-agency task force targeting a massive multi-state syndicate involved in identity theft, bank fraud, and illegal underground gambling. A syndicate led by a ghost the FBI called the Architect. I stared at the passport in my hand. The name printed beneath my husband's face read, Jonathan Vance. The phone in my hand vibrated again. This time, it was my official CMPD department iPhone. I answered it automatically, my voice sounding like it belonged to a ghost. Brooks, Captain Miller's voice boomed through the speaker. Emergency briefing at the Law Enforcement Center on East Trade Street. Get your gear and get down here now. The federal task force just got a major break on the Architect case. We are moving. The drive down Independence Boulevard was a blur of flashing brake lights and wipers scraping against the windshield. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles turned gray. Jason. The man who held me when I had nightmares about active shooter scenes. The man who cooked dinner every Sunday, who promised to grow old with me. It couldn't be real. It had to be a mistake, a horrific misunderstanding. Maybe he was being blackmailed. Maybe he was working undercover for someone else. The desperate, loving part of my brain scrambled for excuses, while the seasoned tactical operator in me calmly pointed out the cold, hard facts: the sheer volume of cash, the sophisticated forged documents, the professional money laundering ledgers. I walked into the CMPD Law Enforcement Center, the fluorescent lights harsh against my eyes. I moved like a zombie, nodding to familiar faces, my boots clicking rhythmically against the polished terrazzo floors. In the main briefing room, the atmosphere was electric. Agents from the FBI's Charlotte Field Office and IRS Criminal Investigation were huddled around a massive dry erase board covered in photographs, financial flowcharts, and tactical maps. "Listen up, team," Captain Miller announced, slamming a hand on the podium to silence the room. "As you know, we've been assisting the Bureau on Operation Broken Dice. This syndicate has laundered over $40 million in illegal underground gambling earnings from Las Vegas through legitimate businesses right here in the Carolinas." An FBI special agent stepped forward, clicking a remote. A massive slide projected onto the wall. My heart stopped. It felt as though a flashbang had gone off right in front of my face, leaving my ears ringing and my vision white. It was a surveillance photograph taken outside the Bellagio in Las Vegas 6 months ago. The man in the tailored charcoal suit, smiling as he handed a briefcase to a known cartel associate, was Jason. "This is the primary facilitator," the FBI agent explained, oblivious to the fact that the woman standing in the third row was dying inside. "We've identified him as the architect. His real name is Jason Carter, though he operates under half a dozen aliases. He's highly intelligent, completely detached, and has eluded federal wiretaps for 3 years. He uses local shell companies, real estate scams, and identity theft to wash millions." I clamped my jaw shut so hard I felt a tooth crack. The room seemed to spin. I forced myself to stare at the screen, at the face of the man I shared a bed with, the man I loved more than life itself. "We've just established a secure, high-level informant within his inner circle," the agent continued, his eyes scanning the room, pausing briefly on me before moving on. "The informant tells us the architect is preparing to flee the country within the next 48 hours. He's consolidating his assets in a hidden location in Charlotte. We need this team ready for a high-risk federal warrant execution the moment we pinpoint the coordinates." I stood there, the uniform suffocating me, realizing with absolute terrifying clarity that I was trapped in a nightmare. If I spoke up, I would be removed from the case, investigated, and perhaps accused of being complicit. If I stayed silent, I was committing treason against my badge. The FBI agent's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his face turning grim. He looked up at Captain Miller. "We have a problem," the agent whispered, loud enough for the front row to hear. "Our informant just went dark. We think the architect knows there's a mole." The briefing adjourned with orders to remain on high alert. I walked out to the parking garage, the air thick with summer humidity, and leaned against the brick wall. I couldn't breathe. My chest was heaving. I pulled out my personal phone and stared at the lock screen, a photo of Jason and me at a beach in Outer Banks, both of us laughing, the ocean breeze catching my hair. How could I have been so blind? The frequent trips to Nevada, the late-night phone calls he always took out on the deck, the sudden influx of expensive jewelry he bought me, which I assumed came from his hard work. It was all blood money. It was all a lie. I had a choice to make, the most critical, tactical decision of my life, and I had to make it in seconds. I could protect my husband, destroy the evidence in the desk, and run away with him. Or I could honor the oath I took when I was 26 years old, the oath to protect and serve, to uphold justice no matter the personal cost. I closed my eyes. Tears scalped my cheeks, hot and angry. I thought of the victims of identity theft, the families ruined by illegal gambling rings, the absolute lawlessness Jason had embraced. I thought of the integrity of the badge I wore over my heart. I wiped my face, straightened my uniform, and walked directly to the FBI field office on Minuteman Way. I didn't go through standard channels. I asked to speak privately with Special Agent Marcus Vance, the lead investigator on the task force. We met in a windowless, secure interrogation room. The heavy steel door clicked shut, sealing us in. Vance looked at me, confused by the sudden appearance of a CMPD SWAT operator requesting a private audience. "Officer Brooks, what can I do for you?" Vance asked, leaning against the table. "We're in the middle of a major operation, so I hope this is urgent." I placed the black waterproof case I had taken from my house onto the metal table. I popped the latches. The sound echoed like gunshots in the small room. I pushed it toward him. "This belongs to the architect," I said, my voice steady, though my soul was screaming. Vance frowned, stepping forward to look inside. His eyes widened as he saw the passports, the cash, and the ledgers. He looked up at me, his hand instinctively dropping toward his service weapon. "Where did you get this, Brooks? Who gave this to you?" I looked him dead in the eye, letting the full weight of my despair and determination show. "The architect is my husband," I said, "and I am going to help you catch him." Agent Vance stared at me for what felt like an eternity. The silence in the room was suffocating. Slowly, his hand moved away from his weapon. He sat down, his face a mix of disbelief and intense calculation. "Do you realize what you're saying, Danielle?" Vance asked, his voice dropping to a low, serious register. "If you're involved in this—" "If I were involved, I wouldn't be standing in this room handing you the keys to his empire," I interrupted, my voice cutting through the air like a knife. I knew nothing until 2 hours ago. He built a wall between his work and our life. But now that wall is down. Vance leaned back, looking at the ledgers. "This changes everything," he admitted. "We can't arrest him yet. If we pick him up now on just this, his lawyers will have him out on bail, and he'll vanish into his offshore networks before we can secure the assets or identify his buyers. We need the physical location of the final ledger, the digital key to the offshore accounts. The informant told us he keeps it on an encrypted drive that never leaves his person or his immediate proximity when he's operational." "He's coming home tomorrow morning," I said, my throat dry. "He thinks I'm completely oblivious. I can get close to him. I can find out where he's keeping the drive." "It's too dangerous," Vance said, shaking his head. "You're his wife, but you're also a cop. If he detects even a fraction of a change in your demeanor, he could kill you. These people don't just gamble with money, Danielle. They gamble with lives." "I am a SWAT operator, Agent Vance," I said, leaning over the table. "I deal with armed, barricaded suspects for a living. I can handle my husband. Let me go back. Let me play the part." 12 hours later, I was sitting at our kitchen island, a mug of coffee between my hands. The morning sun was pouring through the windows, casting beautiful, deceptive shadows across the hardwood floor. The front door unlocked. My heart hammered against my ribs, a wild, frantic rhythm. I forced my muscles to relax, forced my face into the soft, welcoming expression I had worn for 5 years. Jason walked in, carrying a leather garment bag. He looked tired, but when he saw me, his face lit up with that familiar, charming smile that had once made my knees weak. "Hey, beautiful," he said, dropping his bag and walking over to kiss my forehead. "God, I missed you." Atlanta was a nightmare, just endless meetings with corporate lawyers. The smell of his cologne, expensive, woody, familiar, invaded my senses. It was the same cologne he wore at our wedding. A wave of nausea hit me, but I smiled, looking up into the eyes of a master criminal. "Welcome home, honey," I said, my voice smooth, a perfect imitation of a loving wife. "Did you manage to close the deal?" Jason walked over to the refrigerator, his back turned to me for a brief second. "Almost," he said casually. "Just a few loose ends to tie up here in Charlotte, and then I think we can finally take that long vacation to Europe we talked about. Just you and me, Danielle. No distractions." I smiled, nodding. While under the counter, my fingers tightly gripped the edge of the bar stool to keep from shaking. I looked down at his jacket pocket. There was a distinct, hard, rectangular bulge, the encrypted drive. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Every meal, every conversation, every shared glance was a tactical operation. At night, I lay perfectly still in bed, listening to his breathing, wondering how a man could sleep so peacefully while actively destroying the lives of thousands of people. During the day, while he was out running errands, I was in constant communication with Agent Vance through a secure channel. I monitored Jason's movements using the tracking software the FBI had secretly installed on his vehicle during a quick trip to the grocery store. We traced him to a private bank in South End, then to a commercial warehouse district near the North Carolina-South Carolina border. He was moving quickly, consolidating funds, preparing for flight. On Thursday evening, Jason suggested we go out for dinner to celebrate his upcoming retirement. He took me to an upscale steakhouse in uptown Charlotte, a place where the city's elite gathered. The ambiance was dim, the music soft, the wine expensive. "You've been quiet lately, Danielle," Jason said, cutting into his steak, his dark eyes fixing on me with an intensity that made the hairs on my arms stand up. "Is everything okay at the department?" I took a slow sip of my wine, using the moment to steady my pulse. Just stressed, I lied smoothly. "We've been working on a high-profile federal case. A lot of late hours, a lot of dead ends. It wears on you." Jason smiled, a paternalistic, comforting expression that made me want to scream. "You take on too much of the world's weight, baby," he said, reaching across the table to cover my hand with his. "You need to remember that you can't save everyone. Sometimes you just have to look out for yourself and the people you love." The irony was suffocating. I looked at his hand, the gold wedding band catching the candlelight. "I suppose you're right," I murmured. "So tell me about this Europe trip. When are we leaving?" "Sooner than you think," he said, his smile widening. "I'm just waiting on one final wire transfer to clear through our partners in Las Vegas. Once that's done, we're off the grid. I've already taken care of everything." My pocket vibrated. It was the emergency tactical alert pattern, 3 short pulses, 1 long. I excused myself to the restroom. Inside the locked stall, I pulled out my department phone. A message from Captain Miller blew my cover story to pieces. FBI intercept confirmed. The architect has discovered his offshore accounts are frozen. He's panicked. He just ordered an emergency extraction from a private airfield in Gastonia tonight at 2300 hours. The target is heavily armed and accompanied by private security. CMPD SWAT is activated, staging at the old warehouse off Interstate 85. Move, move, move. I looked at the mirror. My face was pale, but my eyes were cold, hard steel. The time for pretending was over. The trap was springing, and I was the one who had baited it. I walked back out to the dining room, but the table was empty. Jason was gone. A $100 bill was left on the table, pinned under his wine glass. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded my veins. I rushed out of the restaurant onto the bustling streets of uptown Charlotte. The city lights blurred as I scanned the crowds. He was gone. He had received the alert at the same time I did, or he had realized I was stalling him. I bolted toward my vehicle, throwing myself into the driver's seat and tearing down the street toward the staging area. I called Vance on the encrypted line. "He skipped out of the restaurant," I reported, my voice tight. "He knows the feds froze the accounts. He's heading for the Gastonia airfield." "We know," Vance replied, the sound of sirens blaring in his background. "Our mobile surveillance lost him near the I-85 corridor, but we have the airfield surrounded. He's going to try to breach the perimeter or use an alternate exit. Your SWAT unit is the primary tactical element. Danielle, are you ready for this?" "I'm on my way," I said, slamming the phone down and accelerating. When I arrived at the tactical staging area, an abandoned industrial park near the interstate, the scene was a hive of controlled aggression. 2 massive Lenco Bearcat armored vehicles stood idling, their diesel engines rumbling like angry beasts. Operators in full olive drab tactical gear were checking weapons, loading magazines and adjusting helmets. I threw open the trunk of my car and pulled out my gear. I stripped off my civilian clothes and donned the heavy, fire-retardant combat uniform. I strapped on my ballistic vest, checking the plates. 29 pounds. It felt heavier tonight. It felt like an anvil on my chest. I slammed a magazine into my M4 rifle, pulled the charging handle back, and watched the round chamber. "Brooks!" Captain Miller called out, stepping into my line of sight. His face was etched with deep concern. He knew. Vance had told him. "Danielle, you don't have to take the point on this. I can put you on the outer perimeter. No one will question it." I looked at my captain, the man who had trained me, who had seen me bleed for this department. "With all due respect, Cap, I'm the point person for Team Alpha," I said, my voice echoing with an absolute authority that left no room for argument. "I know how he thinks. I know how he moves. If anyone is going through that door to take him down, it's going to be me." Miller stared at me for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "Suit up. We just got word from the airfield. He didn't go to the plane. He backed up. He's holed up in a secure commercial warehouse he owns under a fake name, less than a mile from here. He's barricaded, heavily armed, and destroying documents. We move in 3 minutes." Chapter 7. Breaking Point. The interior of the Bearcat was dark, illuminated only by the faint red glow of the tactical status lights. 8 of my fellow operators sat packed tight against each other, our helmets occasionally clanking together as the heavy armored vehicle navigated the rough terrain. No one spoke. The tension was palpable. They knew who the target was. They knew what it meant to me. They kept their eyes down, respecting my silence. I stared at the floor of the vehicle, my hands wrapped around the pistol grip of my rifle. My mind kept betraying me, flashing images of our life together. Jason laughing at a joke, Jason holding my hand when my mother passed away, Jason promising to love me forever, and then the counter images, the fake passports, the cartel money, the absolute betrayal of everything I stood for. He hadn't just lied to me, he had weaponized my position. He had used my status as a law enforcement officer as the ultimate camouflage, the perfect cover. Who would suspect the husband of a decorated SWAT operator? 1 minute out, the driver's voice cracked over the comms. Target is a 2-story commercial office/warehouse facility. Reinforced steel doors, commercial-grade security cameras. FBI reports at least 3 private security contractors inside, armed with semi-automatic rifles. The architect is believed to be on the 2nd floor in the main office suite. "Listen up, Alpha Team," I said into my headset, my voice completely detached from my emotions, operating entirely on pure, hardwired training. We use a dynamic entry through the primary breach point. Flashbangs on entry. Identify targets, minimize lethal force if possible, but eliminate threats if fired upon. The primary target is to be taken alive. The Bearcat ground to a halt. The heavy hydraulic rear doors began to swing open, revealing the dark, rain-soaked night. The smell of wet asphalt and ozone rushed in. "Stack up!" the assistant team leader shouted. We exited the vehicle in a tight, disciplined file, moving like a single, multi-legged organism. I took the lead, holding a heavy ballistic shield in my left hand, my sidearm drawn, ready to lead the breach. We moved swiftly across the open asphalt, utilizing the shadows, approaching the heavy steel commercial door of the warehouse. The breacher stepped forward, placing a specialized explosive strip charge against the door's locking mechanism. He looked back at me, giving a thumbs up. I raised my shield, tucking my head down, bracing for the blast. 3, 2, 1. Chapter 8. The Breach. The explosion was a sudden, violent, concussive wave that blew the steel door completely off its hinges, sending it crashing into the darkness of the warehouse. "Flashbang," the operator behind me yelled, tossing the distraction device through the shattered opening. A blinding flash and a deafening boom rocked the interior. "Go, go, go," I shouted, charging through the smoke, my weapon raised, the flashlight mounted to my shield, cutting through the haze. Immediately, muzzle flashes erupted from the darkness ahead. The sharp, deafening cracks of rifle fire echoed through the cavernous warehouse. Bullets slammed into my ballistic shield with tremendous force, the impact vibrating violently through my left arm. "Police! Drop your weapons!" I roared, advancing steady and unyielding. Behind me, my team opened fire with surgical precision. 2 of the private security guards went down, neutralized instantly, their weapons clattering against the concrete floor. The 3rd guard threw his hands up, screaming in terror as 3 operators tackled him to the ground, securing him in zip ties. "Room clear, 1st floor clear," the comms reported. "Alpha team, on me, stairs," I commanded, my voice booming through the headset. We moved up the concrete staircase in a tactical stack, clearing every corner, every shadow. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it over the sound of my own heavy breathing. We reached the 2nd floor landing. A single heavy wooden door stood at the end of the hallway, light leaking out from underneath it. I could hear the frantic sound of paper shredding and hard drives being physically smashed inside. I didn't wait for an explosive charge. I stepped back and delivered a massive fueled kick right next to the lock. The wood splintered and the door flew open. I stormed into the room, shield up, weapon extended, scanning the environment in a microsecond. The room was in chaos. Documents were scattered everywhere. Standing by a burning metal trash can holding a heavy caliber handgun was Jason. His hair was disheveled, his suit jacket was gone, and his eyes were wild with the manic energy of a cornered animal. He raised his weapon, pointing it directly at the center of my ballistic shield. "Stand back!" he screamed, his voice cracking with desperation. "Stand back, or I swear to God I'll blow this place to hell." Chapter 9. The Final Verdict. I stood perfectly still, my boots planted firmly on the debris-covered floor. Behind me, 4 SWAT operators flooded the room, their rifle lights creating a blinding web of illumination, all centered directly on Jason's chest. The red laser dots of their sights danced across his white shirt like drops of fresh blood. "Drop the weapon!" the operators shouted in unison. "Drop it now!" Jason didn't look at them. He was staring at the visor of my helmet, trying to see through the tinted ballistic glass. He recognized the posture. He recognized the build. He recognized the way I held my ground. Slowly, I lowered the top of the ballistic shield just enough to reveal my face. I kept my weapon trained directly on his forehead. The transition on his face was unforgettable. The manic, desperate rage vanished, replaced by an absolute paralyzed shock. His jaw dropped. His eyes widened as the realization hit him with the force of a freight train. The woman standing at the tip of the spear, the woman who had shattered his empire and broken through his defenses, was the wife he had spent 5 years deceiving. "Danielle?" Jason whispered, his hand shaking violently, the heavy pistol dipping slightly. "No? No, it can't be. What are you doing?" "Drop the weapon, Jason," I said. My voice didn't shake. It was dead, cold, and final. It was the voice of the justice he had spent a lifetime evading. "Danielle, listen to me," he pleaded, tears suddenly welling in his eyes, his charming facade completely disintegrated. "I did it for us. I did it to give us a life where you didn't have to risk your life every day. We can still leave. The plane is waiting. I have millions hidden. We can go together. Please, baby, look at me. It's Jason." I looked at him. I looked at the man I had loved with every fiber of my being, and in that moment the pain, the betrayal, and the heartbreak burned away, leaving only the pure, unadulterated weight of the badge I wore. "The man I loved died the moment I opened that desk," I said, my voice echoing off the walls. "You are not my husband. You are a fugitive under federal indictment. This is your final warning. Drop the gun, or my team will neutralize you." Jason stared at me, searching my eyes for a single shred of the woman who used to hold him in the dark. He found nothing but stone. He looked at the red laser dots on his chest, then back at my face. With a low, broken sob, he let his fingers relax. The heavy handgun slipped from his grip, crashing loudly onto the hardwood floor. "Hands on your head. Walk backward toward the sound of my voice," I commanded. He complied, moving like a broken man, his head down. As he reached me, I holstered my weapon, grabbed his wrists, and pulled them behind his back. I clicked the heavy steel handcuffs around his wrists, locking them into place with a definitive metallic snap. I leaned in close to his ear, my breath hot against his cheek, giving him the final words of our marriage. "You always told me I couldn't save everyone," I whispered. "You were right. I couldn't save you from yourself." I pushed him forward into the custody of the waiting FBI agents. As they led him down the stairs in chains, he turned back to look at me one last time, his face a mask of utter defeat. I stood alone in the ruined office, surrounded by the wreckage of his lies. I slowly unbuckled my helmet, pulling it off and letting the cool, damp night air hit my face. I looked down at my vest. 29 pounds. The weight was still there, but for the first time in 5 years, I was breathing perfectly clear. Thank you for watching. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. We would love to know what you think.